Social from the White House saying this, based on conversations with Prime Minister.
We are anonymous. We are not a government. We are not a political party. We are not your media handlers, your spin doctors, or your carefully rehearsed press secretaries. We are the voice that steps in when power hides behind spectacle, when war is packaged like theater, and when the truth is buried under panic, ego, and propaganda. And now, at the final hour, Donald Trump has made a major decision on Iran. Just seconds before the deadline for attacks on Iran that night, Trump put out a Truth Social message from the White House saying that based on conversations with Prime Minister Sharif near Pakistan, and because they requested that he hold off the destructive force being sent to Iran that night, and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, he would suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. He called it a double-sided ceasefire. He said the reason for doing so was that the United States had already met and exceeded all military objectives and was very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. He said the United States had received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believed it was a workable basis on which to negotiate. He said almost all of the various points of past contention had been agreed to between the United States and Iran, but that a 2-week period would allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. And he wrapped it in presidential language, saying that on behalf of the United States of America, as president, and also representing the countries of the Middle East, it was an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. That was the announcement. That was the reversal. That was the moment. And let's be clear about what that means. All day long, there'd already been talk that maybe this was coming. Then it landed just before the deadline. Suddenly the story shifted from imminent attack to a possible deal in the making. Politically, the justification pushed on air was simple. If Trump could get terms that included an unconditional opening of the strait, then, they argued, he had to take it. They said the markets had to look at that and say he has to do it. One commentator cited polling and said 51% supported the war, 54% said it was justified, but 57% said that if he could get a good deal, he should take it. The same commentator admitted the 2-week period was risky because it would allow Iran to regroup, but still argued that if Trump believed he had a real opportunity to come out with a negotiated victory, then he had to do it. And that is where the performance begins, because only moments after all the rhetoric about annihilation, civilization, and destruction, the pitch changed. Now the line was that he cares about getting peace, that he cares about getting oil flowing again, that if he gets a deal, that fits the image of the deal-maker, and that this is how he wins elections because voters will care about that. At the same time, another point was raised. There was one group not being mentioned at all, and that was Europe and NATO. The discussion turned to what had happened in a short amount of time, with Volodymyr Zelensky reportedly moving through Gulf state countries, saying, in effect, that he was not getting weapons because they were being redirected, along with intelligence from the last couple of years. NATO, it was said, was coming to the White House the next day. Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, was described as having forged a relationship with Trump. But the NATO countries themselves had not. And the point being made was obvious. Trump was not presenting Europe or NATO as part of this deal. This was framed as being about the countries around Iran. Then came the argument that this is what strength looks like, that you are not going to get a good deal unless you apply pressure, and the other side believes you are serious, that the same country that had just sent massive air assets in to rescue one of its airmen over the past weekend was a country willing to do what it takes to keep everyone safe and push back on what they called the largest state sponsor of terror. But they also said something else, that the people relying on the Strait of Hormuz, especially Europe for energy, need to help as well, and that strait matters. They emphasized just how much flows through it, and said the breakdown was remarkable. America's own oil exposure, they argued, was not as severe, but fertilizer was affected, and the strait was described as a major part of the world economy. One commentator even argued that the United States could have sustained a 60 or 90-day war because of the size of the American economy, saying consumers might pay about $50 extra, amounting to roughly $1 billion a day, which he called a small amount relative to a $30 trillion economy. So the claim was that America could have withstood it. But on the other hand, the markets, they said, were going to react very well to the pause. Then came one of the most telling comparisons of the entire segment. They invoked that scene from Patton, where Patton behaves erratically, and his aide says the men do not know when he is kidding and when he is not. And Patton replies that it is not important for them to know. It is important for him to know. The argument was that this is what we were seeing with Trump, that he was tough, that he put pressure on Iran, and that Iran now looked like it was caving. That is how the pivot was sold, not as chaos, not a danger, not as a reckless lurch toward catastrophe, and then away from it, but as strategy. And then the segment restated the core terms once again for viewers just tuning in. Trump had put out a Truth Social post saying there was a deal in the works with Iran, a 10-point plan, negotiating a settlement that included the immediate opening of the Strait of Hormuz. They admitted they did not know what the other 10 points included, but speculated that if it matched previous negotiations, it could involve nuclear material and a missile program that would not continue. They also admitted they did not know what it meant for neighboring countries, but said it had to be a real breath of relief, especially for Gulf Arab allies. There was also discussion of Trump's earlier promise about the war's length. The claim was that he had said this would be a 4 to 6 week war, that the situation was still in that zone, and that he had reminded people just the previous week that the Vietnam War lasted 19 years and World War II and Korea lasted 3 years apiece. The point they were making was that Americans are impatient about the pace of conclusions, but that Trump could now claim victory, and that whatever the final negotiated 10-point settlement ends up looking like, beginning with the Strait of Hormuz, it showed that everybody was serious, and that this would become part of his message on security and affordability. Public reporting outside your source tracks the same broad turn. Trump publicly said he would suspend the bombing of Iran for 2 weeks if Tehran reopened the Strait of Hormuz, and multiple outlets reported that he described an Iranian 10-point proposal as a workable basis for negotiation. Public reporting also notes that he had previously escalated with extreme threats about civilian infrastructure and even language about an entire civilization dying. before abruptly stepping back into a ceasefire framework. So that is the story. At the final hour, Trump did not launch the next phase. He paused. He suspended bombing for 2 weeks, tied the pause to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, embraced a double-sided ceasefire, pointed to a 10-point proposal from Iran, claimed military objectives had already been met and exceeded, and presented the whole thing as the near resolution of a long-term conflict. Whether that was diplomacy, brinkmanship, or just another high-risk political spectacle disguised as leadership is exactly the question history will remember. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. If you want more clear-eyed breakdowns without the spin, like this video, share it and stay with us.